Yo, 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 yo. What's good, everybody, on this good. Uh, uh, Gotta get everything together on this good Sunday. That's the lady. It's crazy because that was perfect timing. You got what you need. Uh, but yeah, man, I'm here basically today. Um, just quickly too, because I don't necessarily think I'm gonna be here too long. Uh, I just wanted to come back and follow up on some discussions that we actually had as it relates to a few issues. And we're going to talk about like scripts and algorithms as it relates to politics. Because I just saw recently some new information that came out about Dave Chappelle and, cancel culture and everybody. I wanted to talk about it because everybody is always up in arms and everybody is always the approach that we take to, how can I put this, try to resolve issues. I think in our community we go about it in a way that is counter effective. I understand it, because even when it came to the Joe Rogan situation, um, it was a matter of people feeling like that I was given a pass. Give me 1 second. And hello back, everybody, again. So, like I was saying, talking about scripts, algorithms, and just basically what I feel as though are ineffective ways, and I'm gonna give us some effective ways in which I think are better as it relates to addressing a lot of these issues. So, for everybody who just actually tuned in and is watching, I'm talking about, or I'm using Dave Chappelle, Joe Rogan, and a bunch of other things. You can apply it to almost anything in terms of people weaponizing the outrage, taking that outrage and actually turning it into a commodity, and making more dividends on top of it. Just because I think we have a misconception that a lot of these things that people get upset about, like for example, if you want to take the Joe Rogan situation, a lot of people were saying, "Oh, you're giving him a pass because." My position on it was I don't think, even though Joe Rogan was wrong, I don't think it's effective to actually go ahead and go about it in a way that we're just online in these spaces, shouting them down, because it doesn't get us anywhere, because we don't necessarily have the actual institutional power to make any of these moves happen. And as we saw, like I said, and like I knew it would happen, is he got offered $100 million as a result of being racist, and then you had black people who came out to defend him, which I'm not surprised by either. And then you also had, again, the head of Spotify come out and defend him. Um, and I think what people have to realize is that until we have the institutional power, and we can get into that slightly a little bit later, until we have that power, though, there is no real benefit in wasting energy as it relates to trying to cancel people or move people um, out of a particular position. Like, for example, what's his name? I want to say Donald Sterling, the guy who was a owner of, I want to say, the LA Clippers. It got found out that he was having a personal conversation. He used some racial slurs. Again, and I'm not condoning it, but I think even in that conversation, I've had conversations with friends about similar issues, but in that one in particular, it's like, look, this man still has the relationships. if he's using that word, especially in a conversation that he may not have understood that was being recorded, which was a private discussion, you got to understand that he's probably using that word all of the time in and around people, same as Joe Rogan. And I think the Dave Chappelle case isn't necessarily similar in that way, but on the flip side of it, there was the trans community who was also outraged. But what I think a lot of people got to understand is um you have scripts, right? And we all know scripts are something that people stick to and something that people do to create patterns. I don't know if everybody remember, but when I was in elementary school, we used to get these little cognitive assignments, or what people would call like patterns, right? You have, say, three circles, and then they'll ask you like what comes next, or you'll get a circle, square, then what comes next, right? So that in itself uh, is what you would call a script in the more simple sense. But if you scale that up and you begin to talk about human beings, or if I have anybody in tech who's watching, people plan for things. And so even when we talk about politics, we have to understand that institutions, once a particular thing or phenomenon happens, right now we're specifically talking about cancel culture, we have to understand that people go in to rewrite the script to accommodate that particular thing happening. If you want to take another example and look at protests, right? A protest isn't really a protest if you go through all of the appropriate and proper channels, in the sense that you won't get approved if they deem the protest to be in what we would deem effective, which is bringing the state or institution to the point in which you need it. Um, I think we have to become more aware of those things, and I think when we have and come up on these issues where people have done wrongs, that we have to be strategic in the sense that we can't position people, especially understanding that we're in an attention-driven economy now, that giving people more attention will actually help them capitalize. And just because, again, it's not even always malicious, right? Let's take the little grooving gorilla guy who's like the phenom, right now, of taking advantage of. People hated him, right? All of the comments are, why is this nigga dancing? All of the commentary is, get him off my timeline, or et cetera, right? But he was still able to take that with the retweets, the clicks, the traffic, etc., and still get a deal from a company as an ambassador to endorse a particular brand in and around fitness. I say all that to say is that we have to be very careful about how we're thinking about using these institutions to our benefit in ways that we can actually hold people accountable. Because we always talk about holding people accountable. People having conversations about holding Joe Biden accountable. And I think holding elected officials accountable is a different conversation, because the problem that people are facing is they try to hold people accountable after they get into the relationship or after the person is elected. And the accountability portion happens before even the race, because you have to engage them before the actual race so that you can actually get the commitments during the race, in a manner in which it is understood that I'm not going to endorse you at all if you don't meet these commitments and requirements. And you are already aware, have been aware of these. We've given you what we want you to do, how we want you to do it. And we're clear on all different fronts as it relates to what the expectation is. So that's the first thing. We as a group have to set clear expectations. Too many times I hear people just get upset, and it's like you'll get people who say, "Well, what do you want?" And when that question gets asked every time I'm in a space, most people have no answer. Zero. And that's a problem because when a person presents you with that question, you have to have an answer for that, especially if you're going to go on to say that whatever is being done is an actual issue. So, step one is that we have to get clear on what we want. Step two, and we had a similar conversation to this the other day. Shout out to Monica Ray at our Congress Heights Citizens Association meeting, as it relates to getting clear on not just what we want, but who wants what we want. And I say that because it can't continue to be, we're talking about disenfranchised people, minority people, underserved people, underprivileged people, disadvantaged people, like all of these different vague terms that people use to identify somebody is problematic in the sense that I saw something recently, right? Matter of fact, I think it was the Spotify, not Joe Button. I was about to call that man Joe Button. Joe Rogan issue when everything happened, in the aftermath. I want to say they gave it to communities of color, right? And again, not to say the communities of color don't deserve resources or the funds, but basically they gave millions of dollars to that at large community. But the problem with that is Joe Rogan came under fire for using the word nigger. The word nigger is completely tied to descendants of slaves in America. It has a whole history. It has a whole context. It's not just about being attached to color or melanin in that sense. And so we have to get very clear, not only about what it is we want, but who we want to get what we're saying we want. Just like affirmative action, right? It's not clear that, or no, I take that back. It was made clear. People were just effective and again, co-opting, which is why I'm talking about algorithms and scripts, because people account for the progress, people account for being held accountable, and they figure out a way to wiggle out of these situations. But until we do those two things, we're kind of dead in the water because we don't necessarily have the ability to we don't have the ability to actually create a foundation for the group itself to get to a point where we can have our own defamation league, where we can have our own organizations that collapse down on people and make people bend to the knee when they commit different acts that are disrespect and anti-black and ahistorical. We have to get to that point, and getting to that point is not by just yelling at people and berating people and calling people out of their names. Like, nobody really cares. And I'm telling you all from experience that you really just kind of irritate people, and people just go ahead and make sure that they double down on their anti-blackness. And again, I'm not saying that any of it is right. I'm not saying that you shouldn't express grievances. Don't mistake me for coming from it at that angle. But what I am saying is that sometimes you got to understand that a person don't give a damn about your grievance. And am I going to waste 4 or 5 more years after also spending previous time to try to express this grievance? And they clearly understand the grievance because the grievance is articulated and weaponized, again, co-opted through script, because we know how this shit go. It go the same way every single time. It's just like a computer. It's input, output, input, output, input, output. And what the institution is really good at is when you get a new input, when we start doing and putting in new inputs, like if you want to take the civil rights movement or if you want to take all of these different organizations that began to manifest, okay, how do we devalue that? All right, let's co-opt that. We got to account for that script. All right, let's create a workaround because they are continuing to the inputs that they're using are getting them progress. How do we change? How do we go in? And I'm talking about institutions who are in opposition. Go in, change that so that it becomes ineffective. Even if we want to take a look at what do you call it? The student loan debt crisis. The student loan debt crisis exists for a reason. Again, it was also Joe Biden who made it so that we could not file for bankruptcy as it relates to student loans. But that was done for a particular reason, because the context in America was always if you got educated, if you became more educated, that would get you to the middle class, that would get you to this sort of freedom that Negroes always wanted to have and access. And again, not saying that that is wrong. That's something that you should, in fact, do. But you got to understand that at a particular point, they didn't weaponize that. And now we're here. That's why we're here. And a lot of people don't really understand it because I watched this segment from, I want to say, Brianna Joy Gray, and she had a Jewish woman that was on talking about how America has continued to fail the descendants of slaves in America. But she goes on to say that America is only racist to the American Negro. Brianna Joy pushed back slightly, but I would agree with the Jewish woman in the sense that what people have to begin to understand, you, like, people who are quote unquote black, people of color, women of color, all of these different amalgamations of what aren't the white Anglo-Saxon Protestants who conquered the land, you all are caught in the crossfire of the seeds and the scripts and the algorithms that have been put in place to lock in the American Negro into a caste. So as a result of that, you are, as you navigate America, which is why it's so important to talk about and why she brought up the conversation around being white passing and how race in America completely differentiates itself from race in any other place because it is a strict binary, and you have to pick and choose which not only phenotype or what you want to classify yourself as black or white, let's say Latino, Puerto Rican, et cetera, when you have the cultural disalignment, but you can also choose to opt into it ideologically and become anti-black, and then you get your dividends in that way. That in itself is accounting for and co-opting what people believe is the browning of America being this great thing, right? Because America has already accounted for that script. So Negroes took it upon themselves, and we said, okay, cool. Let's advocate for more brown people to come into America, because more brown people would some way and somehow, because of the strict binary that exists within America currently, will benefit us, because whiteness would push those brown people into being radicalized due to the violence, abuse, emotional abuse, being locked out of the economy, etc. Right? So it makes sense at that point in time, right? But what the institution did, okay, let's account for that algorithm. Let's account for that step. Let's account for that input. Let's account for that script, right? How do we account for that script? We have to go in and, again, change what that input gets in its output, in its outcome, rather, right? So instead of brown people being automatically brutalized or casted into Negroness, because if you do it that way, they will begin to outnumber us, not just phenotypically, but ideologically. Which is why it was a very different response from the Haitian community when they were met at the border versus Mexicans and people who may come from Spaniard lineage, who may be more prone to adopt American whiteness, because Haitians have a long history of going against what we would deem in America American whiteness or colonial powers, right? So, to account for that, okay, cool, let's brainstorm. That's a phenomenon. We can't change the phenomenon because we've learned if we are too heavy handed, then we will get a response from the global community that doesn't work, because we saw what happened with Adolf Hitler. We saw what happened with tyrannical regimes. So how do we do this in a way that is not necessarily humane, but we don't run the risk of having so much opposition against white Anglo-Saxon Protestants? Because there's also a bunch of derivatives within whiteness, right? Which they also adopted into whiteness because it's beneficial. Even when you talk about like German whites, Scottish whites, Irish whites, etc., Italians, etc., right? But what you do, or what happened is, okay, we'll let that take place. But people who come into the nation, we're going to give you incentives, whether those be economic incentives, cultural incentives, which is why now we have all of these separate days and the ability to express your cultural heritage, because that was not always a thing in America. But it is to create the divides within the brownness, because everybody advocates for their own specific group. The idea that the Negroes had was that everybody come in and advocate for this chasm, this huge economic gap that has been created. Well, I would say, I don't even have a word for how large the gap is in terms of economics when you look at black and white. And that's especially if you remove, again, black immigrants, right? So what you have now is you have a subdivisions within advocacy, and none of this. And again, I'm not saying that any of this happens in a malicious way, but you have to understand how you're being weaponized against a whole. And so instead of it being a conversation in and around the core of America, again, American slavery is the core. Like, a lot of people are so confused and don't understand why we're having all of this inequality at such a high rate that it's eclipsed the medieval times in Europe. Like, it's eclipsed the Gilded Ages of America. It's doing that because we are not holding accountable the transfer of wealth from not just white people, but people who held a particular ideology. When you allow for the South to win ideologically and then give them reparations to buy out their slaves and let them rebuild, the ideology never dies. It continues to live on. And so when you see all of these different things get co-opted, i.e. our rage, from whether it be people calling us niggers, from whether it be people gunning us down in the streets, from whether it be the disparate policies or the lack of resources that we get and the lack of access from, and not just any opportunities that wield wealth, that wield the space to actually create a stable foundation, not just opportunities like the gig economy, which are extra exploitative because it takes advantage of the instability. So again, you have these different institutions that come in, account for the script, account for, and if we want to stay at the gig economy, account for the script in the program that has been written as the American dream. It accounts for the carnal script, the carnal algorithm of needing to survive. It accounts for all of those things and weaponizes it against the very population itself by being able to extract, again, hours on hours on hours on hours without so much as to give people the bare minimum of benefits that is required to survive in an ever evolving cataclysmic disparate level of inequality. Like I read an article, I came across an article the other day that talked about rising rent prices, and it's so interesting, when I see people talk about rent prices and what people think is expensive, what people think is not. I think we have to understand that a lot of this is going to get worse if we don't address people's ability to co-opt these different forms of activism, different solutions. Because again, the gig economy was supposed to be a solution, but it has not presented itself as a solution. It's presented itself as something that has taken advantage of. Even if you want to take a more just strictly capitalist approach of something that came out of the pandemic, right? You had what everybody watched Versus, right? Versus was started out as people literally enjoying themselves on Instagram, going back and forth, artists organically, boom, 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 right? Investors, Apple, Trilla, I saw the liquor companies. I want to say, what is that? What is that vodka brand? They came in. I saw them endorsing it. And again, people will say that there's nothing wrong with that, Devon. That's capitalism. It is capitalism. But if you understand the problem within how predatory these things are, you begin to have to address the fact that we feed this beast in a lot of different ways. Let's take housing for another example, right? And this is, again, institutions accounting for script. The script was, and the script still is, home ownership is the pathway to the middle class. And we haven't even updated what the middle class is, which we need to do because $100,000, $120,000 doesn't move the same way as $120,000 moved in the 1950s and 60s. Because even now, they're talking about what, a 7.5 inflation rate, supply chain issues, etc. But understand that even within that, home ownership is not the pathway to the middle class at this point, because we're talking about people who already have large amounts of student debt, consumer debt. And you have to factor in the price of housing, and not just the house itself, but the upkeep of the housing and every other thing that you have to do to maintain a particular salary that will maintain that. Because let's talk about that, right? To make $150,000, you have to move a completely different way now. Because a lot of things have been automated, because the society moves at such an unreal pace, we have to have a discussion around what does making $150,000, what does making $200,000 look like for not just your day in, day out, but also a person's health, emotional stability, spiritual health, family health, because as we see, all of these things are destroying that baseline family institution, and that's in all races, right? The family is collapsing, and that's the first political unit. So now home ownership is not a pathway. It has also been co-opted and weaponized. People were upset about the predatory lending, which you should be, which we should push policy to address that. We need to address all of those things. But what doesn't work and what is not helpful, especially at this point, is having week-long conversations about fuck this person, fuck that person, fuck this person, this, da da da. You getting yourself into a tizzy for nothing. Go to some community meetings. Speaking of community meetings, my ANC meeting is this Thursday, 7 to 9 p.m. Go to my page, Instagram, Facebook. You can get the link. But go to some of these organizations, participate. Actually change and influence people. Because I promise you, sitting around having conversations all day about, again, I'm not a fan of Joe Biden. But in most cases, outside of up here on eavesdrop, when we talking about specific issues or specific events or things that have taken place, I'm not really talking about Joe Biden. I knew who he was. It is what it is. People are mad and upset because people are naive. Don't you gonna bombard them with what? Calling them names? And that's all you gonna do? Again, you can call them names, but at the same time, you need to be doing something else that actually help the collective. And that's the other thing too. We can't just assume and have these flat conversations around people being held accountable in this very flat way. Like, fire one white man because he said a racial slur doesn't do much. It doesn't set a tone, because behind closed doors, if y'all really knew what goes on behind closed doors, don't nobody like niggas. It's just you got caught. That's all. It's like cheating on a spouse or something. Like, you really didn't give a fuck, but because you got caught, it's a whole thing right now. You kind of sorry, because I don't. It's subscribe to that, but it's the same concept, and that's where you get a lot of the confusion from. And I want people to understand that, like, it's all a script, it's all an algorithm. Everything is an input and an output, man. If you don't understand anything outside of like politics, understand that it is all problem solving. It is all equations. The humans in capitalism, and you hear me say it all of the time, humans are spreadsheets. And I say that because humans are unfortunately drilled down to numbers. They are algorithms, controllable algorithms, because essentially all it is a process, a set of rules follow in calculations for problem solving and operations. And an algorithm can just be in any different field. It's not just for computers. The whole reason we have computers, it is a imitation of the human mind itself. And that's where you write the scripts. That's why programming is programming. Because you put the program into the machine, if you press the button, you get an outcome. You do this thing on a website, you get that outcome, because it's all running on scripts, algorithms. You say certain, like, again, when people say, oh, you got to learn how to talk this way, do this, it's a script. It's a script. You dress this way, you get that. You allow this type of behavior, you allow this type of disrespect, you get that. You run this fast, you get that. You're willing to do this, you get that. It's a script. And the only way that we get ourselves out of this situation is to understand the script. And then con the script in itself. And when I say con the script, is deconstruct it, but figure out a way to manipulate it for our advantage. Like you can really, and I say this all of the time when I talk to people, I can only con a person who has certain biases. And the biases themselves are the algorithms. So like if a person has a particular bias to how a person looks, they're battened by a script, right? So let's use clothes. They have a certain thing about suits, right? So, okay, boom. I know that they do that. And this is where we have to be anchored in what I went back and said the first time. We have to know what we want and who we want it for to be able to maintain ourselves within the space of doing so. And everybody doesn't come to this fight in the same way. Everybody doesn't come to this fight in the same way. But I really just wanted to rehash that because we had that conversation. A lot of people said that I was letting Joe Rogan off the hook. You gotta, Devon, you gotta scream it out. You gotta make it known. Got offered $100 million, double down. And then communities who aren't even niggas got money. You gotta understand the patterns. Life is a series of patterns, and you got to pay attention to them to be able to problem solve them. If you don't pay attention to the patterns, if you don't pay attention to the things that happen, the things that take place, and the rhythm in which they take place, you probably always going to be off balance. We probably going to be always off balance. And when each one of us, enough of us are continuously off balance, there is nothing to build because we just in constant chaos. And that's unfortunate because I want us to really get it together. But I think that, you know, part of that is stop being, I'm not telling, and again, do not mistake what I'm saying because I have a ball of like just passion and drive and anger. Just, it sits, it like resonates. I dealt with it a lot when I was a younger man. I still understand the same, but what I am saying is that you have to wield it in a way that is effective. Like, I don't do the same things. I don't address issues the same way that I did when I was 18, 19, hell, even 22, 23 than I do now. Because I know it's a waste of energy. And I know a lot of the times, okay, I see what you just did. It's going to be addressed. Maybe not right now. Because it take a lot more effort, but I'm not going to waste energy on doing this specific part. But we do have to understand when things are being used against us, when people are exploiting us. Because if we can't get out of this. Another thing, right? Let's take representation for another example. Representation is the script. And this is where Negroes got to get louder because the POC and all of these newcomers don't understand it because they are new and have not seen 100+ years of how representation has been weaponized against you. People don't understand like the whole tokenism sellout thing because some people view it as a good thing. But what they don't understand is that's part of the script. That's part of how they co-opt, like I said, the browning of America. Because representation of what? Your phenotype, your gender, your sexuality. You get representation there, but you don't get representation in your spiritual alignment. You don't get representation in your economic access. You don't get representation in a lot of different other ways that are way more important than it just being, oh, I have a black man up here. This black man can give two shits about black men and going to do whatever he told to do and that don't mean like, but that is another thing that has been, again, re-scripted. to account for the possibility of it being an inspiring thing. Because if we get too many representations, our program, the program, is wiped out. Because if they truly represent the people in which they come from, the culture, the identity, the value system, the politics, our culture, value systems, it's not gonna work. It's not gonna work. So look, only way you can get here is if you adopt our shit, but we'll let you, do the superficial representation thing and talk real good, look real nice, and tell them all of the things that we tell them. Stick to the fucking script. Stick to the fucking script and we got you. We got your back. So long as you stick to the script. Just say what we need you to say. We know it's bullshit, but they keep eating bullshit. Like, you think this gonna work? We've been saying it for like the last 80 years. You think it's gonna work? Nigga, it's gonna work. Trust me. We got them to believe that people of color was not a racist term when we called the Negroes the coloreds. It's gonna work. They don't know. They don't understand. They don't pay attention to the patterns. They don't pay attention to the history. They don't pay attention to the environment. They busy talking, walking, doing shit that destroys them. Because we told them it feel good. Because that's the script. It's the fucking American dream. You really gotta pay attention to how shit is used against you. I tell my son and my wife all the time, don't always think a win is a win. Especially when it's easy. Especially when it's easy. If you know you in a space of opposition, why did you let me win so easily? It sounds crazy, but you gotta process and think about all of the different moving pieces when you engaging with issues. Because again, last time I checked, Joe Rogan, Dave Chappelle, shit, even NDRE apologized. Or not even apologized, but she came off of it and said that Joe Rogan wasn't racist. Like, so what was your point in creating this whole situation? Just for you to come back around and say, nah, I don't think he's racist though. Because you want to keep living the American dream. You don't want that bag to get taxed. But it is what it is, man. I appreciate y'all for tuning in. I just wanted to come and have that quick conversation on scriptures on this good Sunday. But y'all be safe. Let me see something. Because I just seen, yeah. Y'all be safe, man. I appreciate y'all. I see my man Quan is in the chat. Appreciate you, fam. Hope you good. I got to hit your jack. Hope you good. But yeah, I just wanted to, had a little quick roundabout. Because I think I think we got to point out, because one of the other things is we got to get better at calling out when people wrong and when people right. We got to start keeping count. Because not keeping count, motherfuckers just keep getting to say anything, keep doing dumb shit. Like, it's no accountability. It's none. It's zero. Like, how can you be wrong 100 times and when you still get to be in a leadership space? How can you do dummy dickhead shit and you can continue to get access? Nah. We gotta keep count. And it can't just keep being, oh, they made a mistake. No. If you made a mistake, that's fine. I'm not saying you deserve to die from it. But at the same time, if you can't read the shit, why do we want you at the helm if you can't make the play? They running the same plays against us. You can't make the play. Why we keep putting you in the game? Why we keep putting you in the game? Like seriously, we gotta keep count. The numbers don't lie. Ain't that what people say? I always hit that. And I can make the numbers lie. But I always hit that. And there is some truth to that. But we don't be fucking keeping count. We be giving motherfuckers platforms for just saying dumb shit, doing dumb shit, all different every day. And then we come back like, oh, bro, why we don't got no leaders? Oh, bro, why we don't got no da. Because we don't hold shit accountable. We don't hold nothing. I mean nothing. Charlemagne done got it wrong a million times and niggas still watching that shit all the time. And again, it's not to say he a bad person, but it gotta be said that you can't have a mic in front of certain people. Because again, you can talk about rap and all that. That's your lane. That's cool. But when it comes to serious stuff and if we really trying to build and create a foundation, that's serious fucking business. And it's not just about money. And it's not just about clout. But the shit got to start somewhere. And I say we start keeping count, figure out what we want and who we want it for. Specifically. Because that will force you to identify yourself. Because a lot of people be saying what they are, and I just be in these conversations. What the fuck? Y'all got so many identifiers that cross. And we had the conversation about intersectionality, but it's like, y'all really think the browning of America is going to do something? Y'all really think that the WASP ain't account for this? Y'all really think the niggas who gave us slavery, gave us Jim Crow, gave us fucking global tyranny, didn't account for that? But I appreciate y'all, man. Y'all be safe. Thank you. We out. Enjoy your Sunday. Stay safe. Stay cool. If you here in DC, it's all love.